Good evening again from my side. Thank you for this privilege to be here to serve you today. It's great to have the opportunity still to actually read in the Word, as many nations are not able to, or at least they're persecuted. As you know, it's going some time back in time when I was talking here in the pulpit. It's still in Genesis, as Pastor pointed out. It's 49, the verses 18 onwards. Before we go into that, though, I wanted to just read the previous verses quickly through and have just a very few words on it. So at least we have a little bit of sort of a review what happened before we go into the text. So it's Genesis 49, just reading through the verses 1 to 17, please. Thank you, Lord. Okay. So verse 1, Genesis 49. Then Jacob called for his son and said, "Gather around so I can tell you what will happen to you in days to come. Assemble and listen, sons of Jacob. Listen to your father Israel. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power, turbulent as the waters. You will no longer excel, for you went up unto your father's bed, unto my couch, and defiled it. Simeon and Levi are brothers, and their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung the oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." Verse 8, Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness who dares to rouse him. The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. I will wash his garment in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Zebulun will live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. His border will extend toward Sidon. Issachar is a row-bound skinny. It means, just for me, it was a new word, row-bound, never heard. It means skinny. Donkey, lying down between the saddlebags. When he sees how good is his resting place and how pleasant is his land, he will bend his shoulder to the burden and submit to forced labor. Dan, verse 16, will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, viper along the path, that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backward. That's how far we went last time. Verse, I'm sure it's so far that you may not remember it really, because as the months go by, lots of things happen in our lives. So just a reminder of these blessings, what Jacob was giving here to these 7 sons first, and then I go to the other 5 sons and I'm reading today. It's really a very important passage here today, although it's years ago when it was happening. It still has an implication for the state of Israel as we see it, and also for our lives as believers now, being the seed of Abraham, belonging to the, especially to Judah's prophecies where the Messiah came from, extending the blessings through Abraham as his seed to the nations. I would like to bring up a slide here, Paul. I've got some slides, and if possible, could you also bring that to the stream so that people can see it as well? This is just a small little slide I've prepared, and I've got something with me today, which every time I was on the pulpit, I forgot to take it. Now I have it. It makes it so much easier. it was interesting then because of the order, and that's something I didn't cover really well last time. There's an order. The first 6 from Leah, which was being counted here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes to there to 5 and 6, as you see. That's how the order is of birth. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and then Dan and Naphtali, and then so on here, and then we continue here, and then these are the last 2. But the order Jacob has chosen is a bit somehow, as you can see, the first it's the sons from Leah as being here mentioned in verses 1 to 17. So first the first 4, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah. So these 2, it goes in line, and then Issachar and Zebulun. So all these 6 are the first. They're mentioned in the right order. And then the next 4, one of them we have read last time. The first is Dan. So he moves there to number 5, just to make some sense why he did it. He probably wanted first to remember Leah as his wife. He, as you all know the story, was the first to be given to him by trickery, really. But at the end, he loved Leah very much, or Leah. So that was that. And that will bring us now to our new verse of today. Verses we are reading from verse 18, really. There was a verse earlier here, which we were saying, talking about the phrase, what shall befall you in the last days? That's how Jacob starts the blessing, more or less. But was it really? It was more prophecies rather than blessings that he put forth, as we have just read through the first 7 sons here. A blessing, if you think about, especially what Reuben got and Levi, these are not really blessings. They're more sounding like curses in a way, don't they? But God can always turn that around. And we talked about that last time. And if you want, it's online. You can then listen to that again just to catch up what was happening to the other ones and how it was explained and unfolded. Right, that brings us now to the next verses. I put it away for a while. Okay, 94. So we are in 49 still. And then in 18 he says, I look for deliverance. So Jacob sort of stops his prophecies and suddenly starts to say that out of context almost, I look for deliverance, Lord. Now, he said, he also in other translations, for salvation. Now, it means basically that in other translations could mean Jesus, because it's salvation. Yeshua, that's what the Hebrew word says there. So prophetically, yes, it's the same word in Hebrew for salvation, and the Lord is salvation. That's what the name is given to Jesus as the salvation for the nations, but it was already used prior to that. And I still believe that was already prophecy. I look for you, deliverance, Lord. I mean, it's so much out of context. It has to be the Lord, with the Lord Jesus himself. As you know, he's alive at the time of speaking here. He's God himself. So Jacob himself didn't really know what he was saying here because it came from the Lord directly. And it was a word brought forth by man without a reference in some scriptures earlier that God spoke to him, like there were dreams earlier, there were angels speaking. None of that. Man directly spoke here now. That was unique and for the first time. It happened many times after. So God spoke to him in this incredible way here. So basically, Jacob called out for Jesus in a way. That brings us to verse 19 then. And it talks about Gad now. Again, if I could please have the... just slide again. If you have slide up again, Powell, which we had earlier. I think it would just... Joe, where it is. Yeah, so just to remember who Gad is. So he is one of Leah's servants, his son. It could stay there. It's all right. Now, Gad means attack, and his tribe, just to make sense of it, of course, at that time, Jacob didn't know what it's all about, why that name was given. But in the prophecy, this tribe was very much important to supply the troops of the later king of Israel, including David. That can be read by 1 Chronicles 12, verse 14. And then in the days of Jeremiah, among other times also, where there were a strong reference to this tribe as supporting the army. Foreign armies oppressed Gad in Jeremiah 49:1, and then there was victory given. And then we read further, yet victory would be in his hand, he shall triumph at last. That's what it says there. It says in an interesting translation, at their heels in Hebrew. That's the NIV, how they say it. It's akhaber, that's the Hebrew word there. But there is actually meaning in that, what I read. When I read that verse again, will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heels. So there is a reference here from a Judaism where the birthright comes a blessing. Now the normal birth is head first and heel last. From that reference it goes. But as you know, that's why Jacob grasps Esau's heel as a synonymous for victory. He grabbed his heel so that basically I want to be the first, not my brother. So in the womb, of course, it goes a bit far to suggest that he knew it already in the womb. But in a way, you have heard stories where ladies who are pregnant with two, they can see and feel it. One is bumping a bit more than the other. I can't tell. I've never gone through it. But those who have or will, check it out. That's what I read in the commentaries of a medical dictionary. Now, it's really Esau in this case here, when you read about the deceiver, as you say. Jacob later deceived Esau, but was it really? It was Esau. He was the deceiver who did not tell his father that he sold his birthright. So, in a way, if you think about Esau taking the heel in this expression of first the heel and then the head, you can see that the deceitfulness is somehow a little bit in there, and Gad will be attacked by a band of raiders, but he will attack them at their heel. Jacob possibly referred to that a little bit, to that story that happened, and it was well known what Jacob did in that very time. But yeah, as I said earlier, Esau's heel as a reference to what Jacob did then and what became more like a phrase for later generations. I feel that Esau was the one who deceived because he didn't tell his father that the birthright was sold to his brother Jacob. That's probably where this phrase came from, properly. That brings us to verse 20. That's Asher. Now, Asher means happiness. Asher's food will be rich. He will provide delicacies fit for a king, it says here. Again, I read the history of it. Asher, he was somebody from that tribe onwards, which means bread also, or generally food, that in Deuteronomy 33, verse 24, you can see where Moses took this prophecy further, where Asher is most blessed of sons. Let him be favored by his brothers, it says here, and let him dip his foot in oil. He shall yield royal dainties, delicacies in other words. And the land eventually occupied by Asher had comparatively low temperature. Could you please have the next slide? That would be slide number 4, by the way. Slide number 4, yeah. Asher. Yeah, let me get my little... There it is. Very fertile land up there in the north. Did Jacob knew that would be the slot allotted to him? No, in spirit, he probably knew that would be a very fertile land. So he became the land that was occupied by Asher, with low temperatures, a lot of rainfall, making it some of the most fertile lands. So yeah, it provided a food for the rest of Israel in some way. Then, verse 21, Naphtali, as you see. Naphtali, very important part of whose ministry that plot of land was, do you remember? Naphtali. A lot of things took place there. when you look at the lake. Well, who was it? Who's brave enough? What happened there in this area around the lake? Can you read this lake? What's the lake's name? I can't read it from here very well, so can you read it? I was quite small. Is it possible to possibly increase the size just a little bit? It's probably not that easy. No problem, Paul. Lake Gennesareth, yeah? That's where Jesus' prophecies and work was taking place. So an important tribe. Naphtali's land was in a key position near the Sea of Galilee, the region where Jesus did much of his teaching. Then there's a lovely Matthew 4, 12 to 14. I've it here. I just wanted to read this, unless somebody has it much faster than me. I mean, you know my style. I try to involve you a little bit so that you're not getting sleep. It's Matthew 4, verse 12 to 16. Somebody reading it, please. Matthew 4, verses 12 to 16. Yeah, back to verse.
Should I read it?
Yes, please.
Now, when Jesus had heard that John was cast into prison, he departed into Galilee, leaving Nazareth. He came and dwelt in Capernaum, which is upon the sea coast, in the borders of Zebulun and Naphtali.
12 to 16, please.
That it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea beyond Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles. People which sat in darkness saw great light, and to them which sat in the region and shadow of death, light is sprung up.
Thank you. So what a prophecy again that came through, and a reference to the Messiah in a way what Naphtali was as a relatively small place, but yet it had a significance for the whole world. So Naphtali is a doe set free that bears beautiful thorns. Yeah, what a lovely reference here. Beautiful, King James says, goodly. Hebrew shepherd word. Fawn is really small, a deer, and a shepherd, the names of the word as a change for the better, for better good news. So if that's the meaning in all this. You could maybe go as far as saying it's a reference to the good news that's going to come from that son, from that tribe, in that area where Naphtali was situated. It's a very, very strong, I think, reference to what beautiful. It often means the word. So the word, the logos, which is the word of salvation again. So the salvation comes not from some words, it comes from the healing words of Jesus. These are the words, what we want to hear. And that it will change for a better one. That meaning is in that sentence also. Okay, that brings us to Joseph then, verses 22 to 26. Now it says here, Joseph is a fruitful vine near a spring, whose branches climb over a wall. White bitterness, Arcus attacked him. They shoot at him with hostility, but his bow remained steady. His strong arm stayed supple because of the hand of the mighty one of Jacob, because of the shepherd, the rock of Israel, because of your father's God who helped you, because of the Almighty who blesses you with blessings of the skies above, blessings of the deep springs below, blessings of the breast and womb. Your father's blessings are greater than the blessings of the ancient mountains, than the bounty of the age-old hills. Let all these rest on the head of Joseph, on the brow of the prince among his brothers. What an incredible blessing that is. And of course, we have now been with the life of Joseph and his brothers for very long. And as you can see, Joseph himself get a lot of text for what the Lord had been telling to Jacob to talk to the whole world, to us basically. So there's a great blessing on Joseph. Fruitful, it says. A bough, a vine. Some translations, the NIV uses wine. The Hebrew is ben, which is son, in other words. The King James says bough. It's like a branch, sort of. The NIV says vine. It's not an easy verse to actually, because there's some sayings in there, which is not always easy to translate. So to get a meaning, you have to occasionally change a name or a word. But in effect, ben, that's the Hebrew word. It's very much a known word, so we know it means son, basically. So he's a fruitful son in a way, by the well. And well, yes, because he brought Israel to the land of water, to Egypt. Of course, that is a quite clear reference and clear for all the others, for the brothers, they would understand that. But then he was also hated, and he prevailed because of God's hands, as there were on him all the while he was in trouble. Hated by his brothers, sent to Egypt, then hated there, and then brought to the second in chief even. And he received all these double blessings, as you know, the inheritance, his two sons. They got land instead of, as you see, there is no tribe of Joseph there. Instead, God has decided to give two tribes to Joseph, so his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. That's Benjamin. Yeah. Benjamin is the last. That the son which was born, if you please go back to number 1, Carl. Oh, that was a lovely little adding there. Benjamin, there he is, number 12. And in our list, it's also the last one, number 12. So that's verse 27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning he devours the prey, and in the evening he divides the plunder. Again, an interesting one. It's not really something you would expect from a patriarch, just being in the last days of his life, say something like that to his son, but he did. And I was looking into it, what is the meaning of it, and something came up. This was a tribe with a reputation of fierceness. So we're very fierce people. And it says, he shall devour the prey. So to see the extent of this, now I have some reference from Ehud. In Judges 3, he was from the tribe of Benjamin. He delivered the Israelites. It's in Judges 3, 15 to 23, just for you as a reference. And he delivered the Israelites from the Moabites. King Saul, he was also a Benjaminite. 1 Samuel 9:1 and 14, chapter 14, 47 to 52. 1 Samuel, you can read that. And then there's one more. I wonder if you know who was a Benjamite also. Somebody from the New Testament what we know. Don't feel bad if you don't know. I didn't know. It's not really an easy answer. No, I checked it up. I read it again if that's really true. Acts 8, 1 to 3. Somebody else, please, would read it for us. Acts 8, 1 to 3. While I have a zip. Yes, please. Thank you.
And Saul approved of his execution. And there arose on that day a great persecution against the church in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. The both men buried Stephen and made great lamentation over him. But Saul was ravaging the church, and entering house after house, he dragged off men and women and committed them to prison.
Yeah. Acts 8, they probably didn't give you the right reference there. All right, I will come back to that one, unless somebody finds it quickly for me.
I think it's 13.
13. Would you please read, Bob? Would that be okay? Thank you. Oh, was it?
Oh no, that's not. That's the wrong reference.
Ah, right.
Sorry.
No problem at all.
But I thought it was actually Philippians or in one of his epistles. Yeah, Philippians 3:5.
There we go.
That's it. Because he says, "I'm of the tribe of Benjamin."
Yeah.
Is in his
Yeah.
Pharisee of Pharisees.
Yes. That's a good reference. So it was Philippians. Just
Yeah, it says, "Though I might have also confidence in the flesh, any other man thinks that he hath whereof he might trust in the flesh. I am more circumcised the 8th day of the stock of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as touching the law of Pharisees."
that's the reference I was looking for. Philippians 3:4. Yeah.
3:5.
3:5. Okay. Thank you. So yeah. Here we have Paul. He also was from there. Now, that makes sense a little bit when we know about the meaning of it. Ravenous wolf, in a way. And he clearly was one. When you read now about Acts 8, 1-3, how he sort of tried to get rid of all the Christians and killed even. But then in Philippians, we can see that, yes, he was like that. He became one of the biggest evangelists and the most important ones of the New Testament. There's more about this Benjamin tribe of the Benjamins in Judges 19 and 20, where they were almost wiped out because of Gibeah's crime for raping Levite's concubine. That's something that can be read. There's too much context for that. Yeah, it was a very tough story. Indeed, it was. But they survived. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Paul. Okay, that brings us now to the next verses, to the end of that chapter, really, verses 28 to 33. I read it out. All these are the 12 tribes of Israel, and this is what their father said to them when he blessed them, giving each the blessing appropriate to him. Then he gave them these instructions. I am about to be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave in the field of Ephron the Hittite, the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre in Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field as a burial place from Ephron the Hittite. There Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried. There Isaac and his wife Rebekah were buried. And there I buried Leah. The field and the cave is in where the field and the cave in it were bought from the Hittites. When Jacob had finished giving instructions to his sons, he drew his feet up into the bed, breathed his last, and was gathered to his people. Now, here, Israel, he blesses all his tribes once again. He just reflects on what happened before. And then, before he breathes his last, he gives that reference, so please don't bring me to my grave here in this nation. He wanted, even in death, return to the promised land given to him. And he made it very clear to the sons, don't bury me here, bring me there, to my promised land, where he was before. Of course, he saw it, but he could never really return anymore as he was already too frail. It is actually slides 5 and 6, please. Paul, could you bring it up? It gives a bit of information there. This is the cave. Nobody knows for sure, but there is when you ever go to Israel, it's a part of the West Bank now, but you can go there to see it. And apparently, it says that is the place, a very, very important place in history of Israel. The cave that is in the field of Machpelah is today's Hebron. If you go to the next slide, please. Yeah. Hebron. Again, it's hard to see, I guess. Can you see it? It's pretty small. I will learn next. Oh, sorry. It's in the west. Yeah. Oh, right. Yeah, in the west. What they're called. Where? That's a nice one. Hebron. There it is. Thank you so much, Paul. Well done. That's good. Yeah. So, yeah, that's the place roughly where it is, where, and you can see at the same time the distance it took to go there. Goshen, remember, that's where they were staying. And they usually, these are the green lines, these are the trading lines, so they went either here or here, more like here. So I counted something like 400 to 500 kilometers, so a long way in those days. Yeah, that's the place that Abraham held deed to when he bought this field. And in Genesis 23:17, a lot of references again. And also Genesis 25 for Isaac, Rebekah, and Leah, who were then there buried as well. All right. Right, Genesis 50 then. Yeah, we're doing fine. Genesis 50. That will bring us to the last chapter of Genesis and also the last chapter of the life of Joseph, actually. Which is, I thought, when I started some years ago, 2.5, that may go a bit faster than that, but here we are. It's the burial of Jacob and the death of Joseph, so that wraps it up in some way. And I'm starting to read just the verses 1 to 3 now, from chapter 50. Here we go. Now, Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father, Israel. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. When Jacob died, Joseph wept. Of course, he fell on him, and I don't know, have you been with somebody you really loved who passed away at that moment? It's very significant. Some have told me that they couldn't make it in time, or it was hard for them, or just felt the time wasn't right yet, so they missed the time of death. And it was good therapy even for him to see that his father went actually from that world to the next. Be at present was very meaningful for Joseph and the brothers also to see that in place. But it was a sad moment also. And it took 40 full days to embalm him, which was a practice then in the days of Egypt. It's a very interesting procedure, really, because you do really take out the organs and the liquids of the body. That's been done. It doesn't specifically say that it was done here, simply because, and also some preservative spices would be put on the body and so on, so that it mummifies after some time. Yeah, it's quite a tricky process there. But there's an embalming in some type of form for actually all the people in Egypt, but depending on how rich you were and what status you had, there was much more to it. So it could be very simple, it could be a very complicated process. So normally only pharaohs and privileged people were fully embalmed. But Joseph, of course, as he was very famous and important here, it took 40 days, so it was something very special. But then it says, instead, we read that he asked the physicians. And Hebrew word is rapha here. So he didn't ask the priests. And that is of quite a significance, because that was unheard of in that time, what I read in the commentary. It always was done either by the priests or in the presence of priests. It was like a holy thing. You know, you to the aftermath, basically, after the next life. Only a priest could do that. But you know, Joseph, yes, they tried to integrate, but not in that way. I think that's, in a way, for us, sometimes we try to integrate a bit too much, don't we, with our faith. We could be a little bit stronger here and there, I believe. I mean, I say to people who go to school, I mean, for them it's pretty hard. You know, when you get an adult, probably with your colleagues to share it, it's a different level. When you're a younger person in school, you could be bullied for it. And I know for many, they have been bullied, just because they pronounced the word of God and said that Jesus is salvation, which are very much fundamental for us. But Joseph he didn't mind about living there or not. He said, if Pharaoh will kill me for that, I don't care. We don't read any of that, of course, but I can imagine that for Pharaoh it was a bit of a tricky thing here to allow that. There's no, black and white of that, but it would have been actually a bit of an offense here. But it went away somehow, and he asked then also to, which is an interesting thing, he asked in later verses, which we are coming to in a minute, to bring, I'll read that maybe before. It's in verse 4 then. Joseph asked Pharaoh for permission to bury his father in Canaan, which is another interesting bit because, and he allows it, which then not only does he allow it, but also he will give a protection for him to travel there. But first there's a mourning of 70 days, and is there significance in that? A royal mourning would be 72 days. So you got 2 days less. Of course, after all, the Egyptians still saw anybody else as unclean. So that's why they were put into Goshen, where the shepherds were. Nobody liked them really. You remember the first stories, those who were here. That was still, although he was the prime minister, still it was a difficult thing for Egyptians to come close to him. And so it was for Joseph himself. As you know, we call it the implicate. These people were kept clean from other influences in that very Goshen area there for 400 years. The Egyptians didn't want to do anything with them, and the Israelites didn't really want to do anything with the Egyptians either. They just lived next to each other, basically, side by side. As you see today in some communities, same country, but two different communities, different cultures. They don't really interact very well. But here it was a good thing, an incubator of the Israelites to come to conquer back the land 400 years later. 4, then that goes a bit faster here now, verses 4 to 14. When the days of mourning, please forgive me, I need to take my glasses when I read a bit more. When the days of mourning had passed, Joseph said to Pharaoh's court, "If I have found favor in your eyes, speak to Pharaoh for me. Tell him, my father made me swear on oath and said, I am about to die. Bury me in the tomb I dug for myself in the land of Canaan. And now let me go up and bury my father. Then I will return." Pharaoh said, "Go up and bury your father, as he made you swear to do." So Joseph went up to bury his father. All Pharaoh's officials accompanied him, the dignitaries of his court and all the dignitaries of Egypt, besides all the members of Joseph's household and his brothers and those belonging to his father's household. Only their children and their flocks and herds were left in Goshen. What they just showed there. Chariots and horsemen also went up with him. It was a very large company. When they reached the threshing floor of Atad near the Jordan, they lamented loudly and bitterly. And there Joseph observed a 7-day period of mourning for his father. When the Canaanites who lived there saw the mourning at the threshing floor of Atad, they said, "The Egyptians are holding a solemn ceremony and mourning." That is why that place near the Jordan is called Abel Mizraim. So Jacob's son, as he had commanded them, so Jacob's sons did as he had commanded them. They carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave in the field of Machpelah near Mamre, which Abraham had bought along with the field as a burial place for Ephron the Hittite. After burying his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, together with his brother and all the others who had gone with him to bury his father. So Pharaoh basically asked for permission here to get his father there, which I already mentioned earlier. And then we see there's an entire gathering here, the clans, they all went there to pay tribute. And this was a long way, 400, as you can see, 400 to 500 kilometers possibly. But it was more than that. Yes, the travel it was huge, but they wanted to go. They wanted to be part of that. They wanted to see the land as well, where they could have stayed there and not return. Pharaoh did quite a risky thing to let him go. In some way, they could just not, I'm hiding, going away, like prisoner escaping. But it wasn't the time, wasn't it? Canaan was still of enemies, and the 400 years were not yet fulfilled, as we have heard earlier. There was a time where that place needed to be eradicated from the people there, but it wasn't there yet. Why not? Because God gave a chance to the Canaanites to repent and come to the Lord for that 400 years. But as you know, and they did not do that. So it was a long time of mourning of 70 days of that very time. And so when they traveled, again they were mourning there for 7 days. And then they were more or less like to see the great covenant made to Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. Because going to that place where basically Isaac and Abraham was buried, and also the others, their wives, that must have been something very special. I think they must have maybe re-vowed, we will go to this nation one day. This is the place where we belong. You need sometimes places just to remember that even in your own lives, you go back to certain, what you can't overcome. It's good to go back to that very situation rather than running away. You have to go back to it. Make sure you have dealt with it properly and not just half-heartedly. It could be a forgiveness, for instance, where you can't forgive all the situations in life. Or where God has spoken to you that you have a certain ministry in your heart. You should maybe be a missionary, or you should do a certain job. Or something in your family where God spoke to you in a very clear voice, which only you would understand. Or even the simple one, the very first one, make a decision for Christ. And we were running away, just left it. Something in the childhood I thought we'll do later. Now it's good to go back to that very place. And I always like to go back to the place where I became a believer. At least for the first 4 years. I went back every year, met the same people again, spoke to them, and became part and got stronger in me. And I think it was a bit like of a maybe to just reassure, don't worry, you yourself may not see it, but your children will. That was basically a summary of these verses here. It's more like a summary chapter anyway, as you have already figured out possibly. That brings us to the next verses, 15 to 17. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph hold a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrong?" If you think in your heart that you can't forgive, you keep on not forgiving, it's going to be tough. But they did this. Remember how many years ago, after 17 years in the land, they still thought like that, as if they had never seen Joseph before. Did they learn anything really? Did they really learn anything? I wonder. I mean, they weren't together so much. Remember, he was more like in palaces, Joseph, whereas the rest was where the shepherds were. So they were separated. He wasn't all the time there. I understand that, but I still feel that the brothers still haven't learned much, really, as they were thinking like that. And then they were saying, so the brothers, because they were afraid, 15 to 7, what we just read, 70, before your father died, he commanded. That's a bit of a tricky one. This story was probably made up, and it goes in line with who Jacob was and who Isaac was. You see the stories they have made up to trick their way around, right? I don't want to say that for sure, that maybe Jacob has said it some way earlier, but the way it was sort of, because what if Joseph holds, it says it here, and he pays back for us. So out of that fear, it seems like they make a story there a little bit. Yeah? Let's just say something that will calm him down, basically, isn't it? We all do that, don't we? We try to make situations a bit softer, or as they really are. You call that white lies? You can think about that. But they didn't feel they had the moral right to ask Joseph for mercy somehow. They themselves, it was so bad. And I've read that doesn't apply to every Jewish brother and sister, but there is still a saying that you can't really forgive a person on behalf of somebody else. So basically, you can't forgive a murderer, in a way, Of course, I thought about that really, because in heaven it will be forgiven, but so there was that fear that is an unforgivable sin in a way. what they did, because they wanted really to kill him, to murder him. So they had a chance. If really somebody murders somebody, it will never be possible to say sorry to the person. Of course not. You can't forgive, not in person, but to God you can. Yeah, that. There was a lot of fear here that now, because they did this, they may be, they were just at the mercy of Joseph right now, and they're really fearful of him. And what did Joseph then do? He said that he wept. If you see, when the message came to him, Joseph wept. Any thoughts on that? Why did he weep there? There's no right or wrong answer, but why did he weep in that moment? Because he wept earlier, of course, but his father died. That was very clear. But now he wept again. Once his brothers said this. What could you think? Why would he weep there? Considering who Joseph was, really, in his life.
Either a weeping because, as if to say, you don't know me by now, that I could have already destroyed you.
Mm.
You did to me, and I didn't yet, so why would you think I would now?
That's it.
Maybe. Another thing that stands out to me is because verse 17 could be highly manipulative on the part of the brothers. It's almost like demanding forgiveness,
Yeah,
which when you're the culprit, you don't have the right to do.
that's right.
When you have done wrong, you can't demand someone forgive you. You can only ask for forgiveness, but they don't even ask for it. They just demand it, and they don't even demand it in the name of themselves, but in the name of their Father.
Yeah.
Which is even more manipulative. So, I don't know. Maybe he weeps because of that, or maybe he weeps because it's a weeping of, hey, you don't know me by now, how I am a gracious person, a giving person, a loving person. You think I'm this kind of vengeful man. I don't know. Those two things stand out to me.
Yeah. I guess that is exactly what I guessed, more or less, really. It is almost like shouting at me. And any more thoughts? Yeah.
I think I just also add that Joseph loved them, all of them, in spite of everything what they have done to him.
Yeah.
He really loves them, and he forgives truly from the bottom of his heart. So when he heard what these brothers have been after towards him, he feel like maybe inside, why are they saying like this? I forgive them because I love them.
Yeah.
So he wept because of his love to the brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and how much he loves these brothers, that he don't think about this because I love you and I forgive you already from here in my heart.
Yes.
Yeah.
That goes very much in line with what Bob said now. This is really, the theme is here, forgiveness already, isn't it? And the brothers didn't understand it. Paul, could you please bring up the next slide? I think it's number 7. I've just come with a few verses here with forgiveness. You can read them just for yourself and keep them in your hearts, please. Yes,
Just really quick.
of course.
On that point, because Joseph already dealt with this issue with his brothers, if we remember back in chapter 45.
Absolutely.
Because he said to them there, when he finally revealed to his brothers who he was, it says, and Joseph said unto his brethren, come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph thy brother, who you sold into Egypt. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that you sold me here. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years have famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing or harvest. And God sent me here before you to preserve your posterity in the earth and save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me here, but God.
Mm.
It's profound. So he already, in a way, he's like,
Double.
guys, it's all God. This is what, even though what you did was wrong,
Yeah.
the Lord used it for good.
That is why we seem to forget the forgiveness. And sometimes you dig it out. It's like forgive, but not forgotten. Do you know? There's a phrase we have it. Of course, sometimes certain things can really hurt in life, but it has to be brought to the Lord, and then it needs to be kept there. It's important. Joseph did it already. But you know, when I was reading about commentary of profane references to forgiveness, you know, in counseling and so on, it comes up in a lot of research that forgiveness is a big part of even physical health. Never mind the mental health, you know, what goes with it. And I personally have met who really couldn't forgive people. It wasn't possible for them. And it was a really hard time to talk to them. It was really, really difficult. And Jesus, otherwise believing, yes, but forgiving, that, not that one. And I can't judge it. Some of the atrocities in people's life could be horrendous, really. And sometimes you may not expect, that came out also, that don't expect that the others will forgive you as long as you do your part. Some may never forgive, but you need to be prepared that that may happen, but as long as you do it on your side. It might be a process. Don't do it hastily. Think about it also. Not like a quick, and then what it was actually about, don't even know, just forgive, you know. No, sometimes it's good to think about it. So these verses, the Lord says it himself. It's a big theme. There are plenty of verses about forgiveness where that is very important for our togetherness as people. That is verses 18 to 21. We're coming to the end. Isn't that lovely? It won't take any much longer. It's verses 18 to verse 21. But Joseph, hang on. Okay. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide you and your children," and reassured them and spoke kindly to them. So it wraps it up already, what we were saying here, what we elicited together now about the character of Joseph. He mentions that what he did was bad. He didn't sweep it under the carpet. No, he names it by name. This is also good. What is he forgiven? That thing, yeah? Let's talk about it. But also that the reference, as we come now to closing here with the life of Joseph, what was he always known for when we started, back in the days, when we started our lives of Joseph 2.5 years ago? There was always one reference to what Joseph's life seemed to resemble. Thank you, Iris. That was the one. And he had come through even more in the last chapter of Genesis. Think about it. The chapter of forgiveness, you can call it. Yes, this is a chapter of the beginning. That's what it's called. But this is also the chapter of the ending of the patriarchs and even of Joseph's life as the last final chapter. Yet, it refers to the beginning of the salvation of the whole world. And that's what Joseph is. Here it reflects the assemblance to Jesus in these verses we just read now. Thank you, Lord. It's so good, and that the brothers also fell down before his face, because I think that was the final one now. Now they really understood it. They didn't probably fully understood it then. Now the father was in chapter 45. But now it was clear. It was meant that way, and they believed it. They fell down on their faces, and behold, we are your servants, they said. And then they begged for mercy, and Joseph did that, of course. Falling down, that means you really submit now to that person. Okay, that is in the last verses, 22 to 26. Joseph stayed, so I read to 22 to 24. Joseph stayed in Egypt along with all his father's family. He lived 110 years and saw the third generation of Ephraim's children. Also the children of Machir, son of Manasseh, were placed at birth on Joseph's knees. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Joseph still lived 54 years actually after Jacob died. So it's quite tense how they put these years together here. I would have liked to know more what happened in those years, but the Lord has decided not to give us that information. But he lived 110 years, and the blessing he has received to see the grandchildren and the grandchildren was an amazing sign of God's blessing. Think about how the story started. What was Joseph? He was about to die. He was hated by his brothers, and then he was being sold to Egypt, just to reflect again what happened. And then he was forgotten, almost told their father he was torn by animals. Yet he got in the position where he then was, and then he ended up not only to live, but become the second in command of the whole of Egypt, save the Israelites, and be able to see the grandchildren. You know, when you are, I know, my mum told, you were so eager to see the grandchildren. And I've heard many that say, before I pass, I would like to see and have my grandchildren on my lap. That's the saying in my nations. And not only did he see the grandchildren, but also the grandchildren. What a blessing. So God blessed him very much. Isn't that great? Praise the Lord for that. Yes, that is almost the end, 25 and 26. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and after they embalmed him, he was placed in a coffin in Egypt. Interesting, though, that he was staying there. They didn't carry him off to the land of Canaan, but the bones remained there. And he was not really put underground, but I read in the commentary. He was, and it says bones. So, yes, it says embalmed also, but because of bones, there's a suggestion there in the commentary that he was not fully embalmed like Jacob was. Because at the end, the bones were there, not buried, and stayed there in that land. I don't know. One of the commentaries I was reading, it was always there as a reminder to see that this has to be carried to the other end after 400 years. So the generations after generations will see it. There were many generations in 400 years. So it remained there. It actually doesn't say really as if it were more like a box. Avron, it's the word here, like a box. It doesn't say exactly where it was placed, but it was definitely reachable and movable for the time when when the Israelites left Egypt. And we can read this in Exodus 13:19, where they actually carried the bones of Joseph back there to the land. That brings us to the end. I'm speechless almost now, because it has been a long time to go through this, and I got a little bit fastened to the end. But I like to make a resume here of this life of Joseph in general. Now, first, actions can have long-lasting consequences in our life. It is really true, God forgives, He does, He forgives all sins. But sometimes it bears a consequence on our lives, especially as believers. If there are certain sins in our lives that will actually be irreversible with, let's say, irreversible sin, where adultery, for instance, and then a divorce and so on and so forth, then you have to live with that in some way. But God will never forsake you because of that. But your ministry may go in some different ways. And that's fine, that's good, no problem. God doesn't have a higher or lower ministry, that's just different ministries, that's all what it is. That's just one example of many. For these brothers, as you know, the consequences for some of them are quite harsh in a way, isn't it? But still, they made it to the land, their tribes, all 12 of them. So at the end, forgiveness was there. And the next one was maybe the forgiveness as a theme for us to take away from Joseph's life. He was really a forgiver. Let's take that home and be like that also. To your friends, to your husbands or wives, and to your brothers and sisters. That's a big one. Amen. Thank you.